Have you ever had that feeling where you're working, incredibly hard, like doing everything supposedly right, checking all the boxes, but you still feel like you're just treading water?
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Right. You're putting in the hours, you're following the conventional wisdom, but that big breakthrough, that massive leap forward, it keeps completely eluding you. Well, today's deep dive is all about shattering that exact plateau.
And it's a really universally common frustration, honestly, because we're fundamentally conditioned to believe that, steady incremental progress is the safest route to success.
Yeah, slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly. We're taught to be reasonable. But the framework we're examining today, it completely challenges that foundational assumption right down to its studs.
Okay, let's unpack this. So our source material for this deep dive is a really comprehensive breakdown of Grant Cardone's The 10X Rule. And it's essentially this blueprint that argues that the only real difference between profound success and, quiet failure is operating at 10 times the normal levels of thought and action.
10 times.
Yeah. And to be clear here, we aren't talking about like 10% more effort. We are talking about 10 times more.
Right, which is huge. So the mission for our deep dive today is to really get into the psychological engine that drives this whole concept of massive action.
Yeah.
We're going to explore exactly why aiming for average is actually mathematically a failing formula, and how the human brain naturally protects our ego by playing the victim. Plus, how to completely dominate your goals rather than just politely competing for them, in a crowded marketplace.
So to really grasp the 10X rule, I think we first have to completely redefine what success actually is. Because for a vast majority of people, success is seen as this nice to have bonus in life, or maybe a vague, distant destination. Like people love to say that, quote, success is a journey, not a destination.
Right, which is a very comforting, cute saying.
Yeah.
But it absolutely does not pay the bills during an economic contraction.
Yeah, no kidding.
The core paradigm shift here is that we have to stop viewing success as an option or a preference. Instead, the author argues success must be framed as an ethical duty, an absolute obligation, and a fundamental responsibility.
Wow.
Yeah, it's something you literally owe to your family, your company, your community, and really your future self.
And the genesis of this mindset, according to the text, it came from two very specific, jarring wake-up calls for the author. The first was at age 25. He was aimless, struggling heavily with drugs and alcohol, and had this brutal realization that if he didn't treat success as a literal life or death obligation, he simply wasn't going to survive.
It was basic physical and economic survival at that point.
Right. But the second wake-up call is the one that I think resonates with a lot of professionals today. It hit at age 50 during the massive global economic contraction of 2008.
Yeah, and that second realization is incredibly revealing about human nature, because by 50, he had achieved significant, undeniable wealth. But, and this is key, he realized he had started resting on his laurels.
He got comfortable.
Exactly. He had scaled back, he'd stopped operating at those intense 10x levels of output, and because he stopped treating success as a daily, ongoing duty, his companies and his financial security were suddenly at severe risk when the macroeconomic weather changed.
The market turned, and he was completely exposed.
Right. It proved that success is essentially rented, and the rent is due every single day. You can never, ever stop generating it.
I love that phrase, generating success, because it completely flies in the face of what the text calls the shortage myth.
Oh, the shortage myth is everywhere.
It is. We hear it constantly today. It's baked into media, politics, casual conversations, this pervasive idea that success is a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Like the underlying assumption is that if I get a massive slice of the pie, your slice automatically has to get smaller.
Which is one of the most toxic psychological barriers to massive action. Politicians and media networks, they often perpetuate this idea of limited economic reserves because it's a really effective way to create agency or anger.
Or political dependency.
Precisely. But success is not a physical commodity like copper or gold or oil. There's no finite reserve of it buried in the ground somewhere.
Right, you don't mind it.
Exactly. Success is not something you go out and find. It's something you actively create through ideas, action, persistence. If someone else creates a massive multi-billion-dollar enterprise, it does not put a cap on your ability to create one of your own.
There's this wild anecdote in the source material that perfectly illustrates the absurdity of this scarcity mindset. So there's a story about living next door to a very wealthy, famous Hollywood actor. and the street they live on has all these terrible potholes.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah. And another neighbor actually suggested, completely seriously, that the movie star should just foot the bill to fix the entire street. Because, he makes $20 million a movie.
It's a textbook example of how the shortage mentality breeds resentment. People operate under the assumption that because the actor has accumulated so much wealth, he somehow drained it from the surrounding area.
Like a vampire or something.
Right. And therefore he owes it back to the neighborhood. They completely fail to recognize the basic economic reality that his success, his massive home, and his presence actually elevate the property values of the entire street.
Instead of looking at that actor and thinking, wow, look what's possible, look at the scale of success a human being can achieve, the neighbor just thinks, he has too much, he needs to pay for my road.
Yeah.
But, creating that kind of outlier success is notoriously difficult, which is why we cling to the myth of the overnight success. We love to think people just got lucky.
Oh, absolutely. We completely ignore the reality of, say, Colonel Sanders. He pitched his chicken recipe over 80 times before a single person bought it. Or Walt Disney being repeatedly laughed out of financing meetings for his theme park idea.
Or Sylvester Stallone.
Yes.
He was so incredibly destitute while trying to write the script for Rocky that he literally had to sell his own dog for $50 just to buy groceries.
It's heartbreaking, but it shows they did not stumble into luck. They treated their vision as an absolute non-negotiable duty, and they took massive, repeated, unrelenting action until the market finally had no choice but to respond to them.
I do have to push back here for a second, though.
Sure.
If we say success is an absolute non-negotiable duty, like that you must pursue it, like your life depends on it every single day, doesn't that put an exhausting, suffocating amount of pressure on you? It sounds like a guaranteed recipe for severe burnout.
Well, it absolutely sounds exhausting on the surface, but consider the alternative. Failing, or even just struggling in mediocrity, also takes an enormous amount of energy.
That's true.
Think about making excuses, constantly rationalizing why you didn't get the promotion, or the chronic stress of struggling to pay unexpected bills. Lying awake at night worrying about the future, that takes a massive psychological toll.
It's draining.
It is deeply exhausting, but it's an exhaustion with zero return on investment. The pressure of pursuing massive success requires energy, yes, but it is an energy that generates momentum, resources, and ultimate security.
So you're spending your life's energy either way. You might as well spend it building a fortress rather than just stressing about the rain.
Exactly.
So if we accept that we're expending energy regardless, and that success is an abundant duty, why do so many of us stop trying?
It comes down to a fundamental lack of agency, which brings us to the anti-victim mindset.
Right.
The refusal to take absolute control of your environment is the primary roadblock here. The core 10x rule of accountability dictates that you must assume success happens because of you, not to you. You have to adopt the mindset that you are in control of literally everything in your orbit.
Even the things that seem blatantly external.
Exactly. The author points out that people who play the victim have 4 very consistent, observable factors in their lives.
Okay, what are they?
First, bad things happen to them. Second, those bad things happen frequently. Third, they are always centrally involved in the drama. And fourth, and this is the kicker, someone or something else is always to blame.
Always. Playing the victim is incredibly seductive because it's a warm blanket for the ego. If the macroeconomic climate ruined your business, your internal identity as a brilliant entrepreneur remains perfectly intact.
Right, it wasn't your fault. But taking extreme accountability means looking in the mirror and admitting you failed to prepare, which hurts. But you have to take that ego hit in exchange for actual power.
Take a neighborhood power outage, for example, from the text. If the grid goes down, a person with a victim mindset complains about the utility company, blames the mayor, and basically just sits in the freezing dark waiting to be rescued.
Yeah, whereas a 10x thinker looks at the exact same dark house and says, I am responsible. I should have anticipated this and bought a backup generator.
By taking responsibility for a failing city grid, something they clearly did not break, they completely shift their internal locus of control.
They move from complaining to problem solving. They buy the generator, and the next time a storm hits, their family is entirely insulated from the chaos.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly, highly controversial.
Okay.
Applying this to a power outage makes sense, but what about a car crash? Imagine you were completely stopped at a red light. A driver behind you is texting, not looking at the road, and slams right into the back of your stationary car. The framework says you still have to take responsibility for that event.
It does.
How on earth can you be responsible for someone else's complete negligence?
Well, it's designed to be a deeply provocative scenario. It is crucial to understand we are not talking about legal fault or insurance liability here.
Obviously, the police report will clearly say the other guy is at fault.
Obviously. We are talking about psychological agency. If you walk away saying, I am a helpless victim of a bad driver, your brain stops processing the event. You learn absolutely nothing.
You're just a victim.
Right. But if you force yourself to ask, how can I reduce the statistical probability of this ever happening again? You immediately regain your power.
Like, could you have left 10 minutes earlier to avoid the peak rush hour traffic?
Yeah.
Or taken a completely different, safer route?
Or could you have been so relentlessly successful in your business that you could afford to hire a driver, allowing you to safely work in the back seat?
Wow.
Could you have built a business model where clients fly to you instead of you commuting to them? It's not about self-blame. It's about rewiring your brain to view yourself as the active architect of your reality.
Once you establish that level of absolute unshakable agency, you have to actually execute. But the sheer volume of action required is where almost everyone drastically miscalculates.
Yeah, human behavior can basically be categorized into 4 distinct degrees of action.
Okay, let's go through them.
The first is do nothing. Interestingly, doing nothing actually requires a massive amount of mental effort to constantly justify and rationalize why you aren't acting.
Making excuses is hard work.
It really is. The second is retreat. This is an active avoidance of opportunities, usually driven by a deep-seated fear of failure, or paradoxically, a fear of the responsibilities that come with success.
And then there's the third degree, which is normal action. Operating at a normal level of action is insidious. The author argues it's actually the most dangerous level of the 4 because it is completely socially acceptable.
Doing just enough to meet expectations, working your 40 hours, paying your mortgage, society applauds this.
Right. This level of action creates the middle class.
Yeah.
But the book emphasizes we aren't just talking about an income bracket here like $35,000 to $50,000 or even up to $1 million. We are talking about a highly vulnerable psychological state.
The middle class mindset is the pursuit of comfort above all else. If your primary goal is to maintain the status quo, you're operating with a middle class mindset. It's effectively a mousetrap with a giant appealing piece of cheese on it.
I love that analogy.
You get a comfortable salary, a 401k match, a few weeks of vacation, and your brain signals that you are perfectly safe. But you are incredibly exposed to the elements. Macroeconomics do not care about your comfort.
They really don't.
The middle class is constantly squeezed by realities completely outside their control. Inflation, corporate layoffs, AI automation. Wages stagnate while the cost of energy, higher education, and housing just continually accelerates.
And the behavioral differences between these levels of action are staggering. Look at the average worker operating at normal action. They read less than 1 book a year and work about 37.5 hours a week. Contrast that with top-performing CEOs who are reading upwards of 60 books a year.
That is the 4th degree. Massive action.
Exactly. Look at Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, during the brutal 2008 recession. When the economy collapsed, most executives took normal defensive action. They cut costs, laid off staff, and hid in their boardrooms waiting for it to blow over. Schultz took massive action. He flew across the country, showing up at local coffee shops at 9 p.m. to look his patrons in the eye and get ground-level, unfiltered feedback.
He vastly increased his engagement when every logical, conventional business instinct screamed at him to retreat.
You know, operating at normal action is exactly like treading water in the middle of the ocean. You feel like you're working incredibly hard, kicking your legs just to keep your head above the surface.
Yeah.
And you might survive for a while. But the ocean is entirely unpredictable. The moment a storm rolls in, like a global pandemic, a sudden shift in your industry, an unexpected medical emergency, you instantly drown because you spend all your energy just treading water instead of building a boat.
That's a great way to put it. You simply cannot prepare for massive economic gravity or sudden market resistance with normal amounts of effort. Normal effort only works in perfect weather.
True.
To actually build that boat, to break out of that incredibly dangerous trap of the average, you have to completely overhaul how you set targets.
Because you can't just try a little bit harder at your current job. You need an entirely different scale of ambition. You need 10x goals.
Yes.
We have been conditioned our entire lives to set realistic, achievable goals. We use acronyms like SMART goals to make sure our ambitions are reasonable. But setting realistic goals is actually a primary psychological reason people fail.
It seems highly counterintuitive, doesn't it? We're taught that if a goal is too big, we'll get discouraged and quit.
But the reality is the exact opposite. If your goal is realistic, it lacks the gravitational pull to keep you moving when things get difficult.
Right.
If your goal is simply to, pay off my high-interest credit card, it doesn't generate any real passion or dopamine. The moment you face severe resistance, like having to work a grueling double shift or giving up your weekends for 6 months, your brain says, this isn't worth it, and you quit. The goal wasn't massive enough to pull you through the pain.
To counteract this biological tendency to quit, you have to utilize the specific mechanics of massive goal setting. First, the scale must be borderline absurd. It must be a 10x multiplier of what you think you want.
Right.
Second, you must write these goals down manually every single day. Once immediately upon waking and once right before sleep.
Every day.
Every single day. And third, they must be worded in the present tense as if they are a current, undeniable reality. I own 5,000 multifamily apartments. My liquid net worth is over $100 million.
And this isn't just like self-help wishing, right? This is actually leveraging the reticular activating system in your brain.
Exactly.
Your brain is essentially a massive filter, constantly blocking out millions of pieces of background noise. When you write a massive goal in the present tense, you create intense cognitive dissonance. Your brain hates the gap between the statement, I own 5,000 apartments, and your current reality.
It wants to fix that gap.
Yes. To resolve that psychological tension, your reticular activating system starts aggressively hunting for patterns, conversations, and opportunities in your environment that align with that massive goal, things you previously filtered out as irrelevant noise.
And this scale of cognitive reprogramming, it completely alters your relationship with your industry. The framework introduces a brilliantly blunt concept. Competition is for sissies. If you are merely trying to compete, you are already losing. The objective is never to compete. The objective is to absolutely dominate your sector so thoroughly that you become the only viable solution in the mind of the consumer.
You want to create a scenario where comparing you to anyone else feels ridiculous to the buyer. And you achieve this through what are called only practices, deliberately doing the difficult, uncomfortable things that your competitors simply refuse to do.
Like the dental implant company.
Yes, there's a fascinating case study in the text about a dental implant company that executed this perfectly.
The standard normal action in that industry for following up with an unconvinced client was to, send a polite email a few days later or maybe leave a voicemail.
Very safe.
Very safe. But this company decided to dominate. They mandated that their managers call the client's cell phone while the client was literally still driving out of the clinic's parking lot.
That is bold. They would call and say, please turn your car around and come back right now. I have something critical you must see.
And the results were completely staggering. Almost 50% of the people turned their cars around immediately, and 80% of those returning customers ended up purchasing the implants.
Why did that work? Because it completely shatters the normal consumer script. The consumer expects a passive, generic email. A phone call 3 minutes later proves an utterly unreasonable level of commitment to their business. It demands their attention.
They didn't win by competing on the nuanced features of the dental implant or shaving a few dollars off the price. They dominated through a level of follow-up action that their competitors were socially too embarrassed or too fearful to attempt.
We see this principle apply to social media strategy as well in the book. While competitors in a given space are holding meetings, slowly evaluating their digital strategy, and worrying about posting too much, a 10x thinker will just flood the zone.
Oh, yeah.
Posting on Twitter 48 times a day, every 30 minutes, around the clock, sending out email newsletters twice a week instead of once a month.
Conventional marketing consultants will tell you that is corporate suicide.
Right.
They will say it's spamming, it's annoying, and it will alienate your core audience.
But the opposite happens. It completely obliterates obscurity. You might annoy a few people who are never going to buy from you anyway, but you gain massive engagement, you dominate the algorithm, and your brand becomes entirely synonymous with your industry.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? It means you have to realize that your actual enemy isn't the rival business down the street. Your ultimate enemy is obscurity.
Obscurity, exactly.
Absolutely no one can buy your product, hire you for the job, or fund your big idea if they literally do not know you exist.
And to defeat the gravitational pull of obscurity, you have to generate an uncomfortable amount of noise. And you simply cannot create enough noise if you are constantly worried about competing on traditional terms or adhering to polite social norms.
But let's be real for a second. Setting these massive 10x goals, taking massive action, calling clients in the parking lot, posting 50 times a day, how do you actually sustain that level of relentless output without physically and mentally breaking down?
That's the big question.
Right. The answer lies in a psychological trait that modern society typically diagnoses as a massive negative.
Obsession.
Yep.
Society treats obsession as a pathology. We label highly driven people as workaholics, we tell them they are unbalanced, and we constantly advise them to find work-life balance. But this framework frames obsession not as disease, but as an absolute gift.
A requirement, really.
It is a strict, non-negotiable requirement for outlier success.
If you want to see what natural, healthy obsession looks like, just look at children. Kids possess an inherent biological obsession.
They really do.
When they discover a new game, or try to learn how to walk, or get into a specific topic like dinosaurs, they apply their absolute full energy to it. They will focus on it relentlessly for hours until an adult finally comes along and trains them to bring it down a notch. To be quiet, to be normal.
We are systematically socialized out of our natural capacity for obsession. But if you analyze the life of anyone who has achieved monumental greatness in any field, they are deeply, unapologetically obsessed.
Look at the late Israeli president Shimon Peres. At 87 years old, an age when most people have been fully retired for 2 decades, he completed 900 interviews in an 18-month period.
Incredible.
His complete obsession with his diplomatic mission didn't burn him out. It actually provided him with boundless youthful energy.
Because when you are truly obsessed with a massive purpose, you enter a flow state. The work itself becomes intrinsically rewarding. It fuels you neurochemically instead of draining you. It's about the willingness to go all in and deliberately overcommit.
There's a brilliant inversion of a classic poker analogy here in the text.
Oh, I love this one. In a standard game of poker, if you push all your chips to the center of the table and you lose the hand, you are out of the game. Your chips are gone.
Right.
Society tells us to treat our personal energy and our lives the exact same way. We are told to hoard our internal chips, to play it safe, to manage our energy, and to save it for a rainy day.
But the 10x philosophy exposes the flaw in that thinking. Your human energy is a deeply renewable resource. It is not finite. If you push all your chips, your creativity, your physical effort, your passion to the center of the table today and completely strike out,
Yeah.
you wake up tomorrow morning and you can magically conjure a brand new massive stack of chips and push them all in again.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, limiting your daily effort is actually the surest way to run out of momentum. You do not run out of energy by expending it on things you are obsessed with. You run out of energy by suppressing it, by playing small, and by retreating into normal action. You can go all in every single day because human creativity, persistence, and action are infinite, endlessly regenerating resources. You aren't spending energy, you are generating an engine of it.
So to bring all of this together, if you, listening right now, are tired of treading water, if you want to truly shatter the plateau we talked about at the top of the show, you have to completely ditch the seductive trap of being average.
Ditch it completely.
You have to take extreme, deeply uncomfortable accountability for absolutely everything that happens in your orbit. You need to write down massive, wildly unrealistic goals every single day to train your brain to hunt for solutions. And finally, you have to give yourself full, unapologetic permission to be completely obsessed with your mission.
It is a profound systemic shift in how you operate as a human being. And, we've spent the deep dive applying the mechanics of massive action, primarily to career advancement, wealth generation, and business domination. But I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder that applies these exact same principles to a completely different arena.
Okay, what is it?
What if you applied 10x massive action to the internal, quiet parts of your life?
Oh, wow.
Right. If you took your current level of effort to understand a family member you deeply disagree with and multiplied it by 10, or if you put 10x the massive action into pursuing your own mental stillness and emotional health, how radically would that transform your everyday world? Massive action doesn't just have to manifest as external noise and market domination. It can also be utilized to create profound internal depth.
That is such a powerful way to frame it. The mechanics work the same regardless of the target. Whatever area of your life currently feels like you're just treading water, that is exactly where it's time to stop splashing around and start aggressively building a boat. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Now go take some massive action today.